Hello, and welcome to Between Two Psychs. This is the show where we answer your questions on all things psychology and education related. Last week, we spoke about neurodiversity in the classroom, and this week we wanted to focus on leadership. Welcome, I am Adam McCartney, and I'm joined with Mike Lane. Mike, this is the second part of our three-parter, isn't it? We spoke about neurodiversity in the classroom. This week, we thought leadership. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, it's fine. I was keen to get going. I was straight out of the blocks there. Yeah, we did. Absolutely. It's a three-part series. So when we were talking last week about how to be more inclusive in the classroom and helping staff to understand neurodiversity, we both were crossing paths to do with leadership, and we thought it'd be a good idea to dedicate a full podcast to leadership in schools, but in particular, not looking at models of leadership as such, but how psychology could be considered by leaders in schools.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many concepts out there. Different leaders over the years have put their own spin on it and they create up some sort of model. But you don't hear too much about how psychological theories feed into leadership or into school cultures or into systems that manage teaching. Yeah. And I suppose that's what we're trying to unpick a bit today here, is how to bridge that gap. And, it's funny, when you think about neurodiversity and inclusion, we automatically focus on what happens in the classroom. What do you do? But systems are more complicated than that, aren't they? We have to address the leadership question. And this is the soft systems part, the sort of how do you create a culture where people are going to be more inclusive without telling them by wagging your finger, be more inclusive, because we know that doesn't work either.
Yeah. We do know that, absolutely. There are many applications of psychology that we've come across. I mean, you and I have both been leaders in psychology, so we're familiar with the challenges that leadership brings, but we're also familiar with the types and theories and models, etc., that can be used in leadership. So launching into it, let's get going, Adam. I mean, you've done some research. You were saying you've done some research on, what was it, empowerment?
Yeah. So this is a model that I built over the years in terms of, it comes from the theory of communities of practice. For those who are interested, that's by Wenger and Lav. In 1991, they launched it, and Wenger really ran with it with his book in 1998, Communities of Practice. And it's a really useful theory because it shows you how to learn within a community and has many applications at the leadership level. And I used it within my own research, which was about how to include autism by managing systems tensions at a multi-professional level, but it had many classroom applications. And it boils down to three elements. To empower someone, they must feel these three elements overlap: their identity, their role, and control. So control is, how autonomous do you feel? Do you feel that you have the power to behave in a way that you think is best to your practice? And do you have the trusted leadership to do that? So the opposite of micromanaging, essentially. Yeah. Role is how others perceive your job, your purpose, and identity is how you perceive it. If you can get those three elements to overlap, you can consider yourself to be empowered. Now, obviously, it's a model. It's for psychological application. It is a very difficult model to measure. So it's more about, these are principles to think about and ask good questions on, rather than pulling out your questionnaire and getting your Likert scales going and saying, yes, we are objectively empowered, because the sad reality is you will never reach that overlap. There will always be an element that is disjointed, for lack of a better term.
Okay, so if I take that, Adam, if I was a school leader listening to what you've just said, how would I use it?
So for me, I use this in my practice quite often. I would ask them, can they tell me what their own role is? So them as a head teachers, for example, can you tell me how you define your role? And then I would ask them, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? So we focus on leadership first. Is your role conducive to the wider system? Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So I'll give you an example. One head teacher with the best intentions was accidentally slipping into a pastoral role rather than a leadership role. So they had a group of 2 or 3 boys who were really, this was in a primary school, who were really causing lots of issues throughout the school. And the head teacher took it on his own shoulders to go and take these boys away every so often, spend a bit of time with them, and then reintroduce them back into the classroom. And he was doing this over months. And what happened was those boys had a good relationship with him. But how his teachers perceived him, he's the one to come and fix the issues. He physically comes and does it, rather than creating the environment by which the other teachers, the other teaching assistants, the other members of staff feel it is in their power to go and deal with that. So they automatically started to bring these children to him rather than dealing with it themselves. So we had to have a long chat about with your identity is as a head teacher. You see yourself as the leadership, but your staff see you as someone who solves pastoral problems. So therefore, there's a disjointed understanding. How you see yourself and how your staff see you are not the same.
Can I just ask a question there? Sort of comparison. And we're talking about, developing an inclusive school, and you're straight away launching into looking at the perceptions of the leader. How do you see yourself as a leader, and how do you think other people are seeing you? And your example there is demonstrating the conflict. Mm-hmm. So your approach then, as a psychologist here, is first of all asking somebody to consider who they are in the wider equation of the school and the leadership. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you must look at yourself first. Again, if you lean on communities of practice as a framework or as a theoretical framework, it talks about it as a learning model. So when you enter a new community, for example, the teaching profession, you start off in the fringes and you learn from the others in it by talking with them, by dealing with the lesson plans that they've developed with, by learning how to do it yourself. And as you become more experienced in it, you learn more about the profession. And the more you learn about the profession, apply the principles of the profession, your identity starts to change. But then when you step into leadership, it's a new community of practice, but the community is smaller. So you have less people to learn from. So your identity has to change with the new role, but you have less things to bounce off. You have less principles to use, and quite often head teachers reach out for that. And that leads to the role identity issue that I was getting at. And so for this leader, I think he found it hard to leave behind that identity that he had in his previous role.
I think Adam as well. I mean, you talk there about somebody transitioning from, sort of junior management to senior management, for example. But I also think for those people that are in senior leadership management roles and have been for a long time, what you've just described is a good exercise. You're asking yourself constantly as a person who's leading the team, who am I still, and who do others think I am? Mm-hmm. Still, it's a good question to keep coming back to every now and then, I would have thought.
Mm. And how do you relate to your team? Like you just alluded to there now, if you've been around for a long time, a lot of people say like they don't know what it's like on the front line anymore. But to a certain degree, that's true. Yeah. That's where the control element comes in. How do you build in autonomy within your team? Essentially what you're trying to say is, how do I get my team to trust not only my guidance, but themselves? Yeah. You think about the great leaders, even in the last 20 years, the one, I don't know why, because I'm not a Man United fan, but Alex Ferguson jumps to mind, who has a great reputation in terms of winning trophies in football. But if you were to say, was he a great footballer? No, he probably wasn't that great. He was able to make it to a semi-professional level, professional level. Someone could correct me on that. But he was a great leader. because he knew how to get the best out of the team, but he himself probably couldn't participate in the team. So a head teacher has to think in the same mindset: how do I get the best out of my teachers? It doesn't mean that I have to be the best teacher, but I've got to create an environment that allows them to be the best that they are.
Yeah.
And another example I came across in this regard was an early careers teacher who was on this chopping block, so to speak, at risk of losing his job. And they put him onto a plan. And I looked at the plan and I said, within this, a lot of it is about watch me as the head teacher do, and then you replicate it. But that just means that you're going to get him to try and always plan based on how you would do it. You're not actually empowering him to problem solve himself. So you've got to have a different model by which he is able to learn for himself. So going back to that communities of practice framework, being a head teacher, you're too far removed from the learning process. He needs someone who's closer in his career to learn from. So you have other senior leaders, in this case it was a year 6 teacher, who could come along and talk to him about his lesson plans, collaborate with him on that lesson plans, explore some questions on why he picked this, that, or the other. And then you observe the delivery of it and you give him some feedback on the performance side of it as a head teacher. But you don't model it for him because you're too far removed. He needs to understand the next step up, which would be middle management or even a peer. And what happened as a result of that was he then stood up to the plate and was like, I need to take some control of this, because when I build a lesson plan, it's not, am I just trying to please the head teachers? Actually, there's an objective here. The objective is to get all those children engaged, to get back to inclusion, include everyone in the lesson. How do I go about that? I'm not quite sure, but this year 6 teacher's performing well and slightly further on down the career than I am. So I can ask related questions. I can identify with them easier because they're closer in that journey with me. So if you think about communities of practice as a massive circle, they're closer to me in that circle than the head teachers, so we can talk about the same things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm going to just bring it back to what we're talking about, Adam, because it's really interesting. But, when we start listening to things that are very interesting, it can take us away from why we initially tuned in. So we're trying to talk about here supporting leaders of a school to develop a more inclusive, neurodiverse school. Okay. So you've got the idea of the communities of practice. You also raised or touched on bringing people with you as the team and giving an example there. So you're effectively saying, if I'm hearing you right, the development of a vision. So how would the communities of practice model and the empowerment research that you've done help with the development of a vision and then implement that vision? How does it work in that way?
Vision is very important in all of this, and it comes out very clearly in my tensions management research. And even, again, going back to Wenger's work, it's important there too. And the reason is vision creates the framework by which we understand our roles. So if you have a very clear vision, say, for example, the vision is that every child must be included in the classroom. We will have no children who are educated outside the classroom. Every member of staff then realizes my behaviors have to move towards getting every child in the classroom together, learning together. Now, that may not be the appropriate provision depending on the demographics of the children and their need, but that's an example. And the reason that is important is the clarity by which you state the vision means that everyone has a defined role in relation to that. So if you're the Senko, you have a defined role around that. If you're the head teacher, you have a defined role around that. And that's where leadership has to move into the mindset or the purpose of we are trendsetters rather than doers. We're not the front line anymore. Our job is to communicate clearly. So that's why vision setting is so important. And you see it, I would love to get your thoughts on it based on your experience, but I've seen in schools where they haven't got a clear ethos, they haven't got a clear thought process around what they do as a school, and therefore you have patchwork practice going on rather than everybody singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. I mean, I'm a big fan, as I've said to you before, I'm a big fan of Maslow's model in all applications of it, and I'm sure many people also know about the model. When I've been working with school leaders or even developing my own teams, the Maslow's hierarchy framework is pretty good for helping me to just put the human needs first, because sometimes we forget that. You know, we're all humans working here. We have different hats with different jobs written on them, but underneath the hat, we are all humans and we all have needs. So, you know, the Maslow's, I would start off by considering, before I start introducing inclusivity or ethos, etc., are the physical needs of my team being met? You know, in the school, do we have warmth? Do we have water? Do things work? It sounds a minor detail, but it's so important, because at the end of the day, the physical needs for us can cause us, if they're not met, can cause us to lose focus and engagement.
Yeah, and I imagine there's many parents listening to this going, yep, I remember what it was like to have those sleepless nights and how I couldn't function.
Yeah, like yourself, Adam.
Yeah. Just about functioning right now.
Are you doing okay?
Yeah, a few caffeine.
And then the next level up would be, you know, safety. So yes, you are, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Head Teacher, you are feeding me. You are making sure I'm warm and I'm dry. Do I feel safe, you know, or am I under threat? And that threat can come through the smallest of things, such as change, or the introduction of a vision around including children with neurodiverse challenges.
Yeah,
what does this mean to me?
Yeah, that's a very important point you raise, because because Maslow's hierarchy, I can't remember how many levels there are, but the second level being safety, and how many people fall off with that one. Even if you take the example that I give, by just being observed by the head teacher on a daily basis, that can't be safe feeling. You're not going to perform under that, but by switching to a peer, that sense of safety is improved. Yeah. Go on, take us further through Maslow's.
Okay, so, I mean, I was kind of going to split off. This is the benefit of being a psychologist, as you know, Adam, is that we have the privilege of dipping in and out of different applications of psychology. Mm-hmm. But safety in Maslow's would then trigger something in my mind, which is the SCARF model, developed in 2008. And the SCARF was initially introduced to me as a conflict resolution model, but it's far more than that. So connecting to Maslow's safety, you know, when we're under threat, this type of model, the SCARF model, could help. So as a leader, we have a look at the acronym. So S in SCARF is for status. So how does how do the staff see themselves in the team? And then the C is for role. The C is for certainty. You know, what's the predictability here? What's my role going to be in this new change? You know, so again, you can see how it links in with Maslow's safety level. Mm-hmm. The A in SCARF is for autonomy. So how much choice do I have as a teacher in this new vision? How much choice do I have in how I'm going to be inclusive? And the R in SCARF model is relatedness. You know, so how do I fit into this wider relationship? You talked there about empowerment and so forth. So the R in the SCARF model is how do I fit, and how do I relate to others? How will others relate to me? And then finally, the F in SCARF is fairness. You know, so how do I, as a member of your team, how do I perceive these rules? How do I perceive the consequences of putting these in place? What will happen if I put effort in and achieve a small goal, whereas somebody else puts the same sort of level of effort in and achieves a huge goal? You know, where's the fairness? Right? How are things being recognised?
Recognised is the word that came to mind when you were speaking there. Yeah.
Go on. What are you thinking?
I just find that model fascinating in the sense that as you went through it, many of those elements relate to how we would support children.
Yeah.
As well, sense of fairness, how a child's efforts are recognized regardless of progression through the curriculum. And the other one that stuck out to me was relatedness.
Yeah.
Connection. Anyone who's worked directly with me, you'll know that I talk a lot about connection and the importance of that, not just at the child peer-to-peer level, but how adults relate to each other and how adults relate to children, so that sense of community can be developed. And I don't mean community in that sort of pop psychology way. I mean community as in the psychodevelopmental way. We learn from one another. We thrive together. Whether we want to admit it or not, there's no such thing as a lone wolf. We have to have people around us because it's what's best for our development, and it's best for our well-being. And it's funny how a leadership model embeds that regardless, whereas we often talk about it from a psychodevelopmental point of view.
Yeah, we do, absolutely. And it kind of leads me on to the next level of Maslow's then, with what you're saying, Adam, which is officially it's called love and belonging, but we can call it belonging here. So as a leader of a team of people working in a school, how do I foster that sense of belonging? So you go through the physical needs, you've now looked at the safety needs, and the scarf model is going to be dipping in and out of each and every layer of Maslow's hierarchy. But I'm just going to ask you, as you listen to it, is there any aspect of the scarf model that might enhance a sense of belonging in a team?
Several of them. Of the ones that stick out most are relatedness, fairness, and certainty. And the reason being, when you feel like you belong, it has a psychological impact on how you behave. Yeah. So if you're around people who you feel accepted by, you're more likely to show, one, your true self, as in your own identity. So going back to my empowerment model, but also you're more likely to take risks in terms of offering ideas. And why that's important, especially in a professional environment, is the more likely you're to offer a nuanced idea or a novel idea, and you feel like it'll be taken seriously. New knowledge is created. And where new knowledge is created, it can be entertained, it can be collaborated upon, it can be engaged with by the other people in that community. And that can be adapted and applied in various ways. So say an ECT comes in and says, I have something really innovative around SEMH needs, social, emotional, mental health needs. Can I run it by you? And you're talking to the Sync, and the Sync goes like, great, let's hear it. That's new knowledge. The Sync goes, okay, we'll take elements A, B, and C, but element D doesn't really work in this setting. So then you have a new practice. And that person then feels better because they contributed to the community. They feel valued and they are seeing it being rolled out. Once you see your efforts paying off, you feel better around the people who you work with. You feel better with them. You're less likely to go somewhere else, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then you're more likely to offer something else up the next time. Yeah. So the whole community benefits from it.
No.
But just because you feel that you've been treated fairly, you relate to someone, and you know that your idea is going to be taken seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, Adam. And this is the beauty about looking at the model, because you pulled out the 3 letters of the SCARF acronym. Interestingly to me, the first one that jumps out is the A for autonomy, connected to belonging. And the reason being is I often find that teachers are highly skilled people. In fact, the staff that work in a school are driven and want the best for kids. So autonomy is key to belonging, because the members of the team all feel as though they have some ownership of the vision. They have ownership of a contribution to make to the vision. They have belief in their own skills and knowledge and experience and feel recognized. Like you were saying there, they feel as if they have a role to play. And from my point of view, both as a leader of a team but also being in a team, is when I have that sense of autonomy and can see my value, I feel like I belong.
That's so true. And belong has become one of these buzzwords, but it has a profound effect when it's understood. And when you feel like you belong, you feel accepted. And when you feel accepted, you feel good. And when you feel good, you contribute. And when you contribute, other people benefit. And that is the beauty of it.
That sounds like an advert, Alan.
Did you just call me Alan?
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, you lucky man, Alan.
For the listener, Mike managed me for nearly a year and he can't remember my name.
Yeah, I did.
Speaking of which, Mike, this model, the SCARF model, you've obviously led high-performing teams, highly professionalized teams. How did you find implementing this model? Because for many of the people listening who may be in leadership roles, they want to see us put our money where our mouth is, the difficulties that come with this, because we're two educational psychologists talking about leadership in schools, but we both occupy leadership roles in some capacity or another.
Yeah. I don't have a single answer to give you for that, Adam, because, we were talking before about using models like this, and as I'm talking about the different layers of Maslow and its interaction with SCARF, it's how I've worked, both as a leader of a team, but also how I've worked when I've worked with schools and developing systems in the schools. I haven't just started at the beginning and methodically worked through a model. It's very much, for me personally, it's very much about relationships and clarity and making sure people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that I understand where they're coming from. So that sense of autonomy that I was just talking about is very important right across the board. I wanted to kind of link what you've just asked me there, but to something that you said a minute ago, which is, the benefits of belonging and its impact on people in the team. And of course, the next layer in Maslow's above belonging is esteem, which is where I thought you were going to go when you were doing your equation, because
I don't know it as well as you, clearly.
Well, I only know two things clearly, Adam, and this is the two of them. So after this,
episode 3 is going to go downhill.
So esteem is so important, when we're talking about developing inclusivity of children with ND in the school. Having that ability to have a team of people who have high esteem in their skills and high esteem in the joint belief of where we're going as a school leads to creative practices. And of course, the top of the equation is the self-actualization. And self-actualization, to me anyway, is never a permanent state, but we keep tipping into it. Every now and then we have golden moments of practice, whether it's at work or on personal levels. We have those golden moments. And, to me, that's the self-actualization.
You're perpetually trying to get into that flow state where your creativity and the challenge set in front of you in perfect balance, whereby you're producing something innovative and speaks true to your identity. Again, going back to identity, as a teacher, what's important to me, it's about, for the purpose of this conversation, including those who are neurodiverse, by coming up with strategies that allow them to engage with the lessons. You're in your flow state. Your esteem follows that just by getting them involved. And that all stems from, although we've talked about two different models, that stems from leaders understanding clarity of communication.
Absolutely. And you know what, Adam, we do this all the time as psychologists, but we don't always remember that we're doing it. And that we're trained to be social scientists. So we're trained to use the principles of laboratory science and apply it into the human population. So one of the things as psychologists that we use is data. What's our evidence for moving forward? And the reason I'm saying this is because of the question you asked, which is, when you've led teams, and it's data. So do I have any data to help me as the leader? So in a school which wants to become more inclusive of children with ND, I'd need data which means I need to do some kind of data gathering. And one of the best things that I've come across is an audit tool, which will tell me all things to do with ND in the school, from numbers of children to best practices that are being undertaken in the classroom. So a good, solid audit is a great place to start as a leader when you want to introduce this.
Yeah. And how would you set up that audit? Would you do it internally, or do you think that it's best that they reach out to someone?
Normally, with an audit like that, it would have to be a member of the SLT, because there are times when the seniority of that position enables you to get certain types of data. But there's also the ability to interpret it and then to start to develop, service plans or vision statements, etc. So I've often found it's been a Senko or, a deputy head or somebody senior in the school.
Yeah. And I wonder if those senior members would benefit, because we're talking about inclusion, reaching out to sites like the Autism Education Trust or the National Autistic Society to begin generating ideas on how to set up that audit.
Yeah, I think, exactly that. I mean, neither of us have any invested interest in either of those organisations, but they do produce very good resources that schools could use.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The only things we're interested in our own websites, isn't that right?
But I have seen audit tools from the Autism Education Trust used, and they've been very constructive processes to help the leaders and the whole team in general to reflect on where are we good and where do we need to develop, and then turning that into an action plan of, right, this is what we need to develop, what we're going to establish as priorities, and that kind of feeds into things like CPD and staff training.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you alluded to something there, but I just want to hammer the point home is many of the strategies that come from neurodiverse inclusion audits or things like the Autism Education Trust, those strategies are actually beneficial for a lot of children. Those who are neurotypical and those who are neurodivergent, particularly around communication strategies or regulation strategies, you'll find a lot of them benefit a huge proportion of the children you're supporting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the old saying, Adam, awesome practice is good practice.
Yeah. I don't remember hearing that one before, but I'm glad it's an old saying.
Maybe you're not as old as me then.
No, I thought you wrote it.
I want to just come back, so we started off by introducing this podcast as something to be considered by leaders in schools who want to increase the inclusivity of neurodiversity. Is there anything else that, bear in mind we're sort of coming towards the end of this, is there anything else that would be worth introducing now? Or do you think what we've
in terms of leadership?
Well, for people listening to this, yeah.
Yeah, leadership is one of those things you could do an entire podcast on itself. I mean, a whole series of it. But in terms of education, I feel like your role as a leader is to remember that you are the messenger. You're there to set the clear message on what you're working towards. And that's going to look slightly different for each school. And it's very easy to get lost within the muddiness of education. Your Ofsted report might say one thing and you're going, oh God, I've got to do that. You might feel pressure from SATs. If you're part of a multi-academy trust, you might feel pressure from higher up in terms of what the executives of that trust want. And you've got to keep in mind that you have a team and none of those things can happen. Those other pressures can come to fruition unless your team is empowered. So I think is it James Timpson always says, he talks about you got to recruit like a superhero team or something like that, something very warm. But ultimately you are thinking about how do I empower those who are delivering on the message, and the message has to be clear.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Adam. Yeah, you're spot on. So, just to recap, then, so we've introduced the communities of practices model from your research. We've introduced the combination of how the SCARF model and Maslow's hierarchy can interact, and then we've introduced a couple of charities that might offer resources that can support schools. I think, from my point of view, Adam, the final thing that I would say here is that, and I'm sure you'll agree with me here, but do say you don't if you don't. But if any school were interested in looking at developing systems around improving whole school inclusivity connected to ND, that you and I would be approachable.
Oh, absolutely. We want to work with as many schools as possible, don't we? And we've, between us, God knows how many years that we've got an experience. I mean, you carry the lion's share in that for obvious reasons. But we're both very experienced and skilled in that area, and we would relish the chance to support schools on that journey.
Absolutely. So do drop us a comment, if people want to have our support. And what's your web address, Adam, if people want to get hold of you?
Glad you asked. It's www.dradamccartney.com, and that's DRADAMCCARTNEY.com. And Mike, what's your illustrious website called?
Oh, you're not going to spell .com either. I mean, you spell everything else, Adam.
That's because everybody thinks it's McCarthy, and it's not. I'm closer to Paul McCartney than McCarthy. He just don't have the money like he does.
No. Nor the voice.
Paul, if you're listening, please, hands out, please. I need some help.
My website is much simpler. Is ridgewaypsychology.co.uk.
Much simpler.
Thanks, Adam. Nice talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Between Two Psychs with myself, Michael Lane, and Adam McCartney.
For further information, you can get us on our websites at dradammccartney.com for myself and ridgewaypsychology.co.uk for Mike. We're also keen to have you submit questions to us too for future episodes so that we can answer them and get the psychology in the classroom out there for everyone. So please comment, address us on our websites, drop us an email, whatever way you can, get a question to us, and we'd love to answer it on the show.